And I've done that gag before, Arona, Kona, and now Corolla, but I don't even care. Yep, it's back. The car formerly known as the Auris, which was the car formerly known as the Corolla, is now the Corolla again. Because having thrown away the Corolla name in an attempt to ditch the proper boring image of its family hatchback, Toyota forgot that you can't just slap a new name onto something and expect it to be interesting all of a sudden.
Yet.
I haven't seen him, Mrs. Walker.
Well, what can be keeping him?
Yes, the Auris continued in that classic Toyota tradition of making family hatchbacks that you sort of shrugged your shoulders about and said, it's okay, I suppose. And so we've come full circle back to Corolla. And guess what? It's absolute. Let's come back to that. Firstly, why the name reversal? Well, it's for three reasons really. Number one, that for about 13 years, the Auris has been as forgettable as something that you've forgotten. Two, because the car sits on a new platform that's used globally, which for Toyota is very unusual. And three, because since 1966, the name Corolla has become synonymous with solidity and reliability. Mundanity too, but maybe, just maybe, Toyota can do something about that last one. It starts well. This car looks half decent, right? It has creases and that, and in my opinion, both inside and outside, it's the best looking family hatchback that Toyota's made possibly ever. And to drive, it's like a Prius. Yeah, no, not yeah. Actually though, although the majority of these will be sold with the same basic petrol-electric hybrid that the Prius has, this is by far the best application of it ever. In every way it's better to drive than the Prius is, and the Corolla has another trick up its sleeve. It's this, another hybrid with about 50% more power, and which almost takes the Corolla into actual driver enjoyment territory. Shocking, but true. The chassis of this ticks all the right boxes when it comes to the dynamic stuff. It has fancy multi-link suspension at the rear, and it has adjustable driving modes, and the body's much stiffer than the Auris's was. But we know from the other Toyotas, and some of the Lexi to be honest, that the hybrid system has an innate ability to ruin it all with its sluggish, noisy, unresponsive din. Well, that's where the new 2-litre system comes in, which Toyota has developed specifically because it knows all that stuff about the 1.8 system. It knows that people buy that specifically for economy and not because of any sort of driver enjoyment. And I'm surprised and delighted to say that it's worked. Now, you're never going to get the same sort of enjoyment from a petrol-electric hybrid with a CVT type gearbox than you will from a good, simple, powerful, conventionally engined car. But bloody hell, this has a decent go of it, like. For a start, it actually feels quite quick and certainly a heck of a lot more responsive than the 1.8 hybrid. It still has that droney characteristic when it's under medium and heavy engine load. But the difference is that in the 1.8, it takes so long to get to the speed that you want to be at that drone seems to last forever. Whereas in this, it gets up to speed a lot more quickly, so you don't have to deal with that for as long. So, foot down, bit of a whine. But then as soon as you lift off, it goes back to being really quiet and refined in a way that no diesel in particular could possibly be. So you combine that with a chassis that feels genuinely really solid, and all of a sudden you have a Toyota hybrid hatchback that's strangely enjoyable to drive. I know, right? And on top of that, it's actually a nice place to be. The cabin design is simple, intuitive, it's solid, it's nice to look at. Good driving position, good forward visibility, just decent. It's not perfect. Toyota insists on still using 90s style rocker switches and LCD panels, but they feel incongruous because generally it looks modern and pleasant. And let's not forget that Toyota hybrids have always been really good at low speed refinement. This is no different. Again, it's amazingly quiet at low speed. And it's not just because of the drivetrain, there's hardly any wind noise and there's hardly any suspension noise. And there is a really seamless transition between the electric motor and the petrol engine. So it doesn't feel complicated, it just has that press the accelerator and go quality. Remember, a lot of the early hybrid systems, you could really feel when the engine was kicking in. They were kind of lumpy. But in every way, this is a really smooth car, and that applies to the ride too. It's got a really lovely ride quality. Unless you hit something major, like a big pothole or an expansion joint or something, it's got a really nice floaty quality about it. but it still gives you a bit of feel through the wheels, so it's kind of enjoyable to drive. I'm genuinely impressed by the way that Toyota's engineered this car. I'm starting to convince myself that this is a masterpiece of some sort. Let's roll back a bit. Driving the 2 litre is a reminder of how kind of depressing the 1.8 can be, unless you're driving it like you're afraid of speed. And also, and this does apply to both the 1.8 and the 2 litre, if Toyota really is aiming this at the sort of driver who wants a bit of enjoyment, that mythical young sporty person that every car manufacturer wants to buy their cars, then the steering's maybe a little bit light and loose, and the ride quality's maybe a little bit too floaty. But I mean, I'm putting a magnifying glass on it, and I do think that most people will find this genuinely enjoyable to drive. Aside from anything dynamic, this doesn't really feel that spacious inside. The hatch in particular doesn't seem to have a massive amount of headroom, and it doesn't seem to have a load of legroom in the rear either. Behind me now, in my comfortable driving position, there's about that much space. The hatchback version really does feel like it's lacking in rear legroom compared to most other family hatchbacks. Although you can get this as an estate or a saloon that Toyota claims effectively replaces the Avensis, while also admitting that very few people in the UK will actually buy a Corolla saloon. Weird. Strangely though, the hatchback has a shorter wheelbase than the estate and the saloon, meaning those two have noticeably more rear legroom, even though the hatchback is by far the biggest seller of the 3 body styles. All 3 have decent boot space though, none of them class leading, but all good enough. Of course, it's the estate you'll buy if you really need a proper boot, and although it isn't the biggest that you'll find in pure volume terms, it does feel like it's been well thought out. It's got a twin level floor that's reversible as standard. And even when it's at its lowest level, there's still a space underneath the floor that you can put a whole suitcase in, an aeroplane hand luggage size suitcase. Going back to the front of the cabin, in all 3 cases, you might want a little bit more oddman space, and you might want the infotainment system to be that bit more intuitive. Like, it's not Honda infotainment system bad, but you do feel like you want the menus to be a little bit clearer most of the time. It does feel really solidly made, even down to the way the doors clunk when you close them. I have to say though, some minor space, cabin and software issues aside, this is a car that's quite difficult to criticize. So what we have here arguably is the most compelling hybrid hatchback that Toyota has ever made. Or if you're one of the 3 or 4 people that will buy the far less practical saloon version of this, the most compelling saloon. And so we come to the final hurdle, cost and equipment. Well, that's 2 hurdles, I suppose. There's a base model petrol version which does serve to make the Corolla look a bit cheaper at the bottom point, though that's a little bit deceptive because not many people will buy that version. Your hybrid starting point is near enough 24 grand, which is a lot of money, but no doubt Toyota will point to the fact that it does come with a lot of stuff. And it's proper low running costs, especially if you're a business user. Compared to an equivalently powered petrol or diesel hatchback, the Corolla Hybrid's super low CO2 rating means that if you're a company car driver, you will save thousands in BIK tax. Spec then, 4 trims, the price like that, although the basic one is very highly equipped. Now Toyota reckons most people will buy the second one called Icon Tech because it gets nav, some extra parking sensors and a fully digital instrument panel. Bear in mind though that every Corolla has loads of safety kit, most of it's stuff that you'll find on the options list of other things you'll be considering, as well as proper LED headlamps, heated front seats, dual zone climate control, generally the sort of stuff that you have to go top of the range to get elsewhere. So although it's a shame that there isn't like an 18 grand version of this to make it look cheap, it does always feel like a lot of car no matter which one you buy. I drove the hybrid RAV4 recently and I really didn't get on with it, even though it should be better than this. It's more spacious, it should ride better, and because it's a more expensive SUV, it should have a better cabin. I just thought it was classic Toyota. Made loads of sense on paper, but then when you actually got out and drove the thing, it was just so bland and so boring. This thing though, I really think Toyota's got something here, especially the 2 litre one. It's not going to set the world on fire, but I do think there are people who like driving a bit who will drive that 1.8 and just think, nah, it's not for me. But then they'll get into this 2 litre and it's just that bit quicker and that bit more enjoyable. I think this car will turn people onto a hybrid who were maybe on the fence before. And that's not the way I thought this video was going to conclude. The new Corolla is solid, it's good looking, it's practical-ish. It's the very first hybrid that I would actually recommend to somebody enthusiastically with very few caveats. There you go, thanks for watching. There's a more detailed review as ever at Honest John. I'll put a link to it below. Please like and comment on the video, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel. We try hard to make these more interesting than other car reviews. Thanks for watching, bye! It's not going to set the world on fire, but I do think there are quite a lot of people who feels quick and responsive, which is something that you cannot say about the 1.8. Off, man.